네, 그럼 시간이 되었으므로
It's 3:05, so let us begin the session. Good afternoon. My name is I'm Jung-Jun Lee. I'm visiting professor at Seoul National University Graduate School of Engineering Practice. I'll be your moderator. So let me introduce myself. I joined Seoul National University last year, but before that, I was working for LS Electric. For more than 3 decades, I worked for the LS Electric from Germany's Industry 4.0 and the EU's all this digital transformation and sustainability and digital transformation were the topic of my interest. And with DPP implementation and the data space that supports DPP is a big challenge for the Korean companies, and they have to prepare for this. So a few years ago, I worked with the government to be member of the committee for this kind of change. So last year we made a guideline for Korean companies to prepare for this kind of change. So I worked with MOTIE to let them use my insights and finish the project. So Industrial Environment Division used such materials and preparing for the next step. So today's session is about batteries. From 2027, early 2027, DPP is required for battery products. So this is the priority product for DPP. So how should we respond and prepare for this kind of change? This is a very important topic for all of you here, and we have two speakers from European countries. We also have two speakers from Korea, from the battery industry, and we have one more speaker for the panel discussion from Europe. So we have four presentations and have a panel discussion after that. Hope today's session could be very helpful and productive. The panel discussion session is very short, so I will just introduce all the speakers now so we can proceed more efficiently. So we have 5 people. For the 4 speakers, let me introduce them first. And lastly, the panelists will be introduced. So why don't you introduce yourselves?
please.
Thank you. Good afternoon. So I'm Pierre-Henri from the European Commission, the Department on Environment, and I'm coordinating the team implementing ESPR, so the Ecodesign for Sustainable Product Regulation, which is the main regulation on eco-design of product. And my colleagues in another team are dealing with batteries, but the two are very much linked, and the provisions are reflecting each other. So I'll be with you and exchange on batteries today.
네, 반갑습니다.
Good afternoon. I am Seung-tae Kim, Senior Director at Korea Battery Industry Association. Because Professor introduced himself, let me introduce myself too. For 25 years, I was working for MOTIE. About 3 years ago, I joined the Korea Battery Industry Association. I am responsible for helping the battery companies, battery industry, and communicate that to the government to, for example, for companies to prepare for our IRA and the EU regulation. And we are working on the Korean platform for integrated management of the batteries. I will be talking about that topic during my presentation. Thank you.
Okay. Now, okay, thank you so much. So, welcome from my side. I'm Thomas Knote. I'm representing Fraunhofer. Fraunhofer is the largest organization of applied research in Europe. And in this role, we are normally performing research for the benefit of the society, together with associations, companies, and so on. And at the same time, in parallel, in bilateral research projects with companies. And so I was responsible for the technical system and the standards in the battery pass project. As may you know, the battery pass is at least the pilot of the DPP in Europe. And based on that, however, I was selected to follow this work in the CENELEC. This is a European standardization organization, to be the chair for the joint technical committee to create the standards for the DPP framework and system in Europe. So this is one part. The other is bilateral projects. So currently the automotive industry is already implementing battery pass because they have to provide the battery pass already in 2027 in the beginning. So, and I'm so involved in the implementation of that in a large German OEM with 50 plants all over the world. The third one is we discovered last year, hey, just to have standards is not enough. We need test beds and systems to support the companies to do the right things. So, and we just started in April this year a test bed project under the roof of German government, but in conjunction with the European Commission, with DG GROW, to provide to the companies the right test beds in order to be compliant with the standards. And third one is I'm as well an honorary professor at the University of Applied Science in Germany for computer-based system analysis. Thanks a lot.
예, 안녕하세요.
Good afternoon. I am a professional at LG Energy Solution. My name is Seung-hwan Chon, responsible for the regulation. I am responsible for preparing for the EU regulations. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Eric. Today I represent Schneider Electric, which is a French company in energy management and industrial automation. My personal responsibility is supporting customers, clients in battery manufacturing in the Asia-Pacific region. Specifically for battery passport, Schneider is a provider for several industrial technologies, particularly on the data aggregation. And we also provide consulting services for PCF and LCA, for which I will share more later. Pleasure.
네, 오늘 이렇게
Thank you so much. We have 5 experts here for this session. We're going to talk about regulation standards, how the association and the companies are preparing for this new regulation, and how are the solution providers are preparing for this transition. So I think we have a good session ahead of us. So let us proceed with the first presentation. We will invite Mr. Pierre Henry to talk about EU battery legislation in a circular economy perspective.
이 시간이 20분이니까
Please keep to 20 minutes for each speaker. So thank you.
박수로 맞이해 주시기 바랍니다.
To the podium.
Good. Can you hear me? Yes? Not yet the presentation. It's not my presentation. If I speak on this one, I'm not sure you will understand me. Good. Thank you. So indeed, I will present to you an overview of the EU regulation on batteries as it was adopted so in 2023 already. So it's a 2 years old regulation. First, why it was developed. This is to respond to the huge increase expected of batteries in Europe, in particular of electric vehicles batteries, and the impact of this increase in production and use of batteries on resources, including critical raw materials, for example, and on the environment. So here you have a few estimates on the expected increase in raw material mining for some materials, on raw materials refining, on the need for active materials for the production itself and recycling. So on all these, the EU needed to organize the market to allow for this increase in production and to organize the market so that the batteries produced are sustainable. So this framework, regulatory framework adopted in 2023, its objectives is to leverage the EU internal market to foster the production of sustainable, high-quality batteries, but also at the end of life to ensure an appropriate collection and recycling of waste batteries, to ensure the better functioning of markets for secondary raw materials, so precisely the result of this recycling and enabling the use of these secondary raw materials in batteries, and to reduce the environmental and social impact throughout the life cycle of batteries. And finally, mainly as relates to the critical raw materials, to reduce the EU dependence on the imports of material of strategic importance. So the new framework covers the whole life cycle of batteries. So here you have the life cycle in black of new batteries, and in green of the possible reuse or repurposing or recycling of batteries material. And in the different boxes, you have the parts of the regulation, so affecting, attached to each part of the life cycle. So there are provisions on the responsible sourcing, so linked to the material extraction and processing, and to the manufacturing through restriction on the use of certain substances, dangerous substances or substances of concern, on provisions on carbon footprint, on recycled content, on the removability and replaceability of batteries. And then also in the primary use of batteries, in particular for electric vehicles, you have provisions on safety and provisions on performance and durability in this regulation. Then at the end of life, you have provisions on the collection of waste batteries, on the recycling with targets on recycling of specific materials, And then throughout the life cycle, you have also provisions on the classification, which batteries are concerned by which provisions, on extended producer responsibility, and on information and labeling. And this includes the digital passport that several interventions were referring to. So what does it include? You have a chapter in this regulation on sustainability and safety requirements, so which includes the restriction of substances. So this is the continuation of other regulation on specific substances. So that's typically mercury, lead, cadmium, and cobalt for the recycling. Provisions on the carbon footprint. And so the regulation includes already the main principle of carbon footprint. And then this is continued later on through delegated act, giving more details on how to calculate and verify the carbon footprint. Provisions on the recycled content with already targets on the use of specific secondary raw materials in new batteries. And this is staged in time, so it's not applicable immediately, but already there are provisions that apply in 5 years or 10 years' time. Provisions on the performance and durability, in particular of EV batteries. On the removability and replaceability, and this is more for portable batteries or batteries of light mobility vehicles, and provisions on safety. Then you have another chapter dealing more with the end of life on waste batteries, with obligations of producers to collect and enable the recycling of these batteries. So that's what we call producer responsibility obligation, which in general is done through producer responsibility organizations. So producers mutualize this duty to make it more efficient. Then obligations of collection, recycling targets, which I mentioned already, recovery targets of material, and specific provisions when it relates to the shipment of waste batteries. So to ensure that waste batteries is dealt with correctly, whether in the EU or outside of the EU, if they are shipped outside. Then you have other specific chapters in the regulation dealing with the labeling, the marking of batteries, as there are special obligations of marking in batteries, and the information provided via QR code, so leading to the batteries passport, which is a digital version of this information required for each battery. There is a specific chapter also on due diligence, so to evaluate the risk related to environment or social impacts throughout the life cycle of the batteries, with an obligation to put in place a due diligence policy to have a management plan of this risk and disclosure of information on how this risk was evaluated and is being addressed by producers. So the first step in this regulation was a classification of batteries and an update of the old classification. So there was already a classification of batteries, in particular in the old waste batteries legislation, but this has been updated in particular to add a specific classification for electric vehicle batteries, which is now distinguished from industrial batteries, and to have also specific subcategories, in particular for the stationary energy storage system, which was not identified as such in the previous regulations. And so this classification is important, is useful when going through the regulation, because not all provisions apply to all batteries. So you have to know when looking at the obligations to which batteries exactly this applies. Then the core of the regulation are the requirements for the placing of batteries on the EU market. So this is legislation under the internal market legislation, meaning that the requirement apply to all products put on the EU market, whether they are produced within the EU or imported to the EU. So it's exactly the same requirements, and it is important for the EU that these minimum requirements are applied indeed by all batteries. And that concerns the design of the battery, but also the production, requirement on carbon footprint, on recycled content affect the production of the battery. So even if this is not necessarily verifiable on the final battery, it has to be verifiable throughout the life cycle of the battery. And then I mentioned the provisions on the information of the batteries and due diligence by the economic operator. On the end of life, so I introduced already the obligations of producer in terms of extended producer responsibility. To be noted that there is an obligation of registration of producers in the member state, precisely in order to organize this extended producer responsibility. And the purpose of this extended producer responsibility is to organize the collection and to finance this collection. So typically there are additional fees added to the cost of batteries so as to finance the end of life of batteries. That includes, I mentioned the collection rate and the targets in terms of recycling. So there are targets both on the recycling efficiency and on the material recovery. So with specific targets for cobalt, copper, lead, lithium, and nickel. And then there are provisions more to facilitate a second life for the same batteries. So putting conditions under which batteries may be reused if they can still be used in good condition. How they can be remanufactured, so put back to their initial conditions of work. And these, of course, are preferable treatment in comparison with recycling, which is a destruction of the batteries in order to recover its materials. A word on the removability and replaceability obligations. So this applies to portable batteries, So to all the small batteries that we have in many different products, and to the batteries linked with light mobility. So all these batteries need to be replaceable, removable, and so that as conditions on the design of the battery and the design of the products in which the battery are integrated. There are a few exceptions, so where this replaceability by the end user is dangerous, there are the possibility to restrict this replaceability to professionals, but these are limited exemptions, which could increase in time. And this is in particular the case for light means of transport, which of course should be recharged by the end user, but if there is an intervention within the battery, this is limited to professionals. Specific highlight also on the carbon footprint. So the requirement on carbon footprint is applicable to electric vehicle batteries, to industrial batteries above 2 kWh, and batteries for light means of transport. The three have different deadlines for applying the carbon footprint. So the deadline for electric vehicle is the first one arriving, but other type of batteries have also the obligation of carbon footprint, but with a longer time of application. So it covers the whole life cycle. It's based on each manufacturing plant, and it includes so the emissions in terms of carbon equivalent for the use of energy or for other operations in the production of batteries. The methodology, as I said, is to be detailed in the delegated act, even if the main principle are already in the regulation, and we have this principle of stage approach. A word on the passport. So the passport has a digital version of the product information. You have in the regulation itself a list of information that should be included in this passport, including the carbon footprint, for example. The objective is to ensure the interoperability of initiatives, to give access to operators which need to have, which have a legitimate interest to have information on the batteries, for example, to reuse them or to intervene on them. But this should also, in time, enable the consumer to compare different batteries and see what is the best for its own purpose. And this becomes so mandatory as from February 2027 with the use of the QR code. And a last slide on due diligence with this system of control, transparency over the supply chain. This should be supported by a specific plan, management plan by the producer, but of course this involves also the supplier to this producer. The scope here is indicated with the size of the battery manufacturers, but you should know that there is currently a proposal to increase this size. So basically to exclude the medium size battery producers. And finally, this due diligence focus on specific materials so as to identify the main risk associated with batteries production. So thank you for your attention and looking forward to the debate later on.
네. EU의 그 배터리 정책에 관한 아주 세세한
Thank you so much for the presentation on the EU's battery regulation. Mr. Ang Lee, thank you once again. So you were able to finish in 20 minutes. So thank you for that timekeeping effort. And we would like to now welcome Mr. Seung-tae Kim, the Senior Director from Korea Battery Industry Association, to talk about Korea's economy policies and future challenges. The title is the Korea's Battery Circular Economy Policies and Future Challenges. Mr. Kim will begin shortly. And as I mentioned in the beginning, so not just for this session, we have a satisfaction survey. So please access the survey website via QR code and complete the survey. Now, Mr. Kim.
오케이, thank you. 예, 안녕하십니까.
Good afternoon. I introduced myself earlier. So today I will talk about Korea's battery circular economy policies and what kind of challenges are there in the future. So I will be talking for about 20 minutes. Before I begin, KBIA is an industry group, the only battery industry association in Korea. And not only EU, but also the US, the trade issue is, the trend is changing. We see more of the blocks, so IRA in the US and EU battery regulation from EU is a very important trade policy that affects the Korean companies. And EU's battery regulation and IRA is different. IRA is about how to receive subsidy and how you cannot, in which situations you cannot receive subsidy. It's about subsidies mainly. However, EU's regulation is more academic. It has more volume, more research to do, and Korean companies say it's not easy to understand. It's not straightforward, so it's complex. So the Korean companies want the government to help them understand EU regulations. So it is not easy to understand it. So that's why I'm very much looking forward to the EU panelists and the speakers during today's session. If I briefly bring up this battery forecast, according to International Energy Agency, the battery's volume is beyond 1 terawatt. 1 gigawatt was only 15 years ago. So in just 15 years, the volume increased 1,000 times. In 2030, according to IEA, it will be 3 terawatt. So in just 5 years, it will increase 300,000 times. So the increased volume of batteries is accelerating. So with this trend, batteries is not just for EVs anymore. To achieve energy transition and carbon neutrality, batteries play a very important role. UAM, robots, and smart mobility will all depend heavily on batteries in the future. So because battery industry and the market is growing at such a fast pace, how do we sustain this market, or how do we manage this is what the kind of challenges that we have to tackle with. It creates economic growth, but also it creates environmental burden for us. So we can nurture new business sectors by recycling and reusing used batteries, and the environmental perspective, waste disposal, as well as mining and reusing the used batteries, I think can contribute to carbon neutrality. So it can contribute to achieving the ESG goals for companies. And last important part is the supply chain. Used batteries can be recycled, and core materials can be found in used batteries because Korea doesn't have natural resources. So in Korea, this industry of reusing and recycling used batteries, I think, will create more jobs and contribute to economic growth. If you look at this graph, this is the global volume of batteries. By 2030, about 338 gigawatt hour by 2030 of used EV batteries. About 13 million batteries will be used EV batteries. 450,000 used batteries in Korea. And if we could reuse and recycle these batteries in Korea, it's equal to making 17,000 new EV batteries. Then why do we need to approach it from a circular economic perspective? Because the battery industry itself is growing. It's growing rapidly. And second, the battery raw materials cost is increasing. It's fluctuating. About 2 to 3 years ago, the lithium price was hiking. However, because of slowing down demand of EVs, the lithium price have declined as well. But we don't know when the price of lithium will increase. So we have to be prepared for this kind of fluctuation. And batteries account for 40% of the EV production cost, and half of that 40% comes from raw material procurement. Manganese, nickel, and cobalt price is fluctuating at all times. Therefore, the supply chain uncertainty is caused by the fluctuations in the raw material price. And also, regionalized production and the procurement risks are another challenge, because these raw materials and metals are found only in the concentrated areas, and low labor cost. Because of low labor cost and abundant natural resources, the battery raw materials mostly come from China. So these create other uncertainties and challenges. If you look at the circularity of the battery industry, NCM batteries are the mainstream in Korea, and LFP batteries are the mainstream in China. So NCM has some of the pros compared to LFP. NCM batteries are expensive compared to LFP in the beginning, but they have higher recycling rate compared to LFP. So therefore, NCM batteries, if you look at the whole life cycle of it, it's more economical. And if you look at the recent reports from EU academia, NCM batteries have higher recycling rate and generates less greenhouse gas emissions, and also have lower resource depletion potential compared to LFP. So NCM batteries are more pro-environment compared to LFP batteries. In this session, I want to touch upon the current status of domestic and international use battery management systems. So let me look at some of the major countries. This is United States. Recently, EV demand was on the rise. However, EV penetration rate is about 9%. In EU, it's about 20%. So in the US, I think we'll see more EVs penetrating the market. So EV battery recycling market has great potential. And because of IRA, when you recycle a battery, so if the US companies recycle batteries made in China, still these companies in the US will get tax credits. At this point, that the Trump administration, with their big beautiful bill, there may be lots of changes regarding EV subsidies and IRA, but at this point, IRA will contribute to more EV consumption, and this will contribute to the market growth. The big beautiful bill passed the Senate, and they are waiting for the passage of the bill at the representative level. And once Trump declares the one big beautiful bill, and the IRA will be updated according to that bill. And this new update will include, for example, if the many Korean companies receive ANPC subsidies from the U.S. government, but President Trump says that ANPC will be eliminated because this is not helping the U.S. economy. So Korean companies were facing a lot of uncertainties. So the association and many Korean battery companies are trying to have more access to the U.S. legislators. So even if the bill is passed, I think the Korean companies will be able to receive some of the benefits very similar to ANPC, and 45X will block Chinese companies penetrating the U.S. market even further. So there could be some bright side to the Korean companies. And this is now EU. Promoting battery industry innovation is done through Green Deal, Circular Economy Action Plan, and New Industrial Strategy in the EU. EU Battery Alliance is strengthening the industry policy and build battery value chain across Europe. EU battery regulation is a stricter rule compared to the old directives. This kind of regulation includes, just like previous speakers said, there are some of the target carbon footprint reporting, collection and recovery targets for used batteries, recycled content requirements, supply chain due diligence, and digital battery passport. And now moving on to China. Because central government is leading initiatives for used battery collection and recycling, they're seeing a lot of growth. So the government is leading this kind of industry. And also, because of its political environment, BMS data is very important for reusing the EV batteries. But in China, if you want to sell batteries, you have to send the BMS data to their central government servers. So Chinese government already acquired a lot of used battery data, so they have some advantage in building this new industry for battery collection, used battery collection and recycling. In Japan, private sector is leading this industry. So in 2021, about 30 battery-related companies formed the Basque Battery Association for supply chain. From raw materials to suppliers to the battery manufacturer, about more than 100 companies are members of Basque, and we have a very close relationship with Basque. So we are cooperating with Basque to respond to EU's new regulation. Next is Korea. In Korea, we have multi-laws that govern the return and storage, performance evaluation, resale, and reuse and recycling of EV batteries. The MOTIE, MOE, and MOLIT also have different jurisdictions regarding the usage or the return and the storage of the batteries. So from the safety regulation that is applied to the collection, transport, and storage is now for discussion to be part of a new law, and we actually lack a lot of regulation. So only the EVs that were registered before 2021 has to return the batteries. So after 2021, if the car is registered after that, there is no mandate to return the batteries. So we have definitely some limits to about this returning the batteries. So we have recommended to the government many times to update this. And because used battery management system is very fragmented among different government organizations, we are relatively slow in dealing with used batteries. So we are voicing that there must be an integrated system or a regulation or a ministry that is responsible for the management of the used batteries. So for the management of the used batteries, some government has making efforts. So the used batteries are now part of not waste but part of the raw materials. And regulatory sandbox and KC 10031 was revised. Lastly, with this new law for the Electrical Appliances and Consumer Product Safety Control Act, which was revised, the government revised this to enhance the recycling and reuse of the used batteries. So with this change globally, I want to talk about proposed integrated management system for used batteries led by the private sector. In 2022 September, the government announced a joint plan called Promotion Strategy for the Circular Economy of Used Batteries, and this includes the integrated management system of the used batteries. Battery Alliance is led by a private sector because MOE and MOTIE, because Ministry of Environment wanted to go for EPR, and MOTIE wanted the private sector to lead this kind of effort. So the government agencies could not agree on this topic. That is why they decided to launch the Battery Alliance, which is led by the private sector, and the government will accept or receive the recommendations from the Battery Alliance. So we had a lot of discussions in Battery Alliance to come up with what I will be sharing in this new next slide. Of course, the background, I already mentioned it, so I will skip this slide. Moving on. There are 5 principles for used battery management system. We need to have circular economy principles to use the battery management, integrated life cycle management. We have to support the R&D. EU going for EPR, and in Korea, private sector is leading this effort. And lastly, we have to have a fair trade platform where market principles are applied. So these are the principles that we are working on. In 2023 November, the Battery Alliance recommended establishing an integrated management system, and this was reviewed by the government agencies. It resulted in consensus. Now it is introduced by a representative as the Act on Management and Industrial Promotion of Used Batteries. So these are the key provisions in this act. First is private-led free trading system and market rules. So anyone, any company that is approved can participate. So some of the small-sized battery companies or some of the batteries from the cars that were flooded during the summer. So we need some sort of a public platform for these small-scale companies or individuals to participate in. Next, establishment of a safety management system for used batteries. Last year in Cheongna, Incheon, there was an explosion of EV in a condo that led to a big fire. So the safety is a very important issue for EVs and batteries. So government is trying to reinforce its safety management system. Next is establishment of the operation of integrated battery history management system. It's a mandate for the companies to submit the battery life cycle data, including usage history and condition. Fourth, renewable raw material usage target system will be included. Lastly, how do we successfully complete the establishment of the integrated management of system for used batteries? The MOTIE is working on Korean integrated data space guidelines and promoting the ISP for development of the battery transaction information system. Ministry of Environment completed the ISP for this integrated environmental information system, and they are going to establish an integrated environmental information center. And MOLIT implemented a battery safety certification system for EVs and is working on an ISP for its development. This is the MOTIE's promoting the ISP for the development of a battery transaction information system by 2027, because the DPP for batteries are mandated by 2027. So we are going to build, the government is going to build this battery trade information system. So it's a very complicated topic. I'm sure you have more questions, but I was not able to cover everything in just 20 minutes. So I have my business card here. You can contact me anytime if you have any more questions. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Kim, for sharing your insights about Korea's battery policies and challenges. Thank you so much for keeping time.
자, 다음 순서로는 우리 프라운호
Next, we will have Mr. Thomas Knote. Please come to the podium. And he will touch upon implementation of ESPR in Sensenelec JETC 24 DPP framework and system and its application for batteries. Currently, the screen also asking once again for you to join the survey. So, over to you, Mr. Knote.
So, thank you so much. First of all, before we start with the slideshow, just to tell you, it is so popular to blame European Commission for over-bureaucracy in entire Europe. And to some extent, as a citizen of Europe, I agree. But with the ESPR and with the battery regulation, it's the other way around. Because here, European Commission set at least the standards, at least for the world. So, because in Europe, we are not so in the front row anymore in technologies and all these things. In circularity, in DPP, it is. And so they developed as well a lot of artifacts and principles we can learn from. Yeah? Because we are in the front row, we must make mistakes. And we should learn from that together. This is the first one. The second is, from this presentation of the Battery Association, I can see we are in the same boat in Europe and in Korea, because we do not have the raw material, especially the rare material. And to just correspond, the import of Europe of the rare material from China in June 2025 went down to 0%. So that's the issue. So we have no other opportunities to keep all the rare material in a circle in order to keep production and a value chain in Europe and in Korea. So we have the same challenge. And I will respond. We are using different technologies and different approaches how to deal with that, and we should learn from that. And this is about my presentation today. So let's go now forward. Yeah. So first, it's theoretical input. How the DPP, the European DPP, is working. At least you can see here there's a car with a battery, yeah, and how to access. Pierre-Henri already explained there is a QR code which is really exclusively defined or demanded by the battery regulation as a data carrier. So for other products like textile or all the others, we can use NFCs and even others. In battery regulation, it is a QR code. And here on the left side, this is at least the DPP system as the European Commission is foreseeing this. And the major item is the distributed data management of the, so to speak, economic operator. This is the producer, the OEM, or the importer. So very important for instance, Hyundai. And this means they are managing the entire data, completely distributed. And this is maybe already a difference to the Korean approach to have it centralized. Yeah? Then we have at least the European Commission system. This is the registry. In the registry, there are just 4 identifiers. First is the product, and this is on model, batch, and item level, dependent on the different industries. For batteries, it's on an item level, and on the granularity of the battery pack, means for the entire car, not on the cell level. Yeah? The second is the company ID. Yeah, this is about the economic operator who brings the product into the market. The third one is a facility ID. This is a production site where it was produced. And the fourth one is a registry ID. This is at least a unique ID which comes back from the European Commission to the economic operator, so that just both knows this ID, and this has something to do with safety and security items. So this is at least the system on the side of the European Commission. In a central way, we have just identifiers. All the data is managed by the economic operator. And the third system is a backup. The backup normally has to be provided by a third partner, and the pure reason is we would like to have the data available even the economic operator is disappeared. Yeah? So this is at least our system, and they are interconnected. So based on this, when you're scanning the QR code, you get at least through this system the data. And what we have is at least from the battery regulation these broad 107 data points. Yeah? And these are mandatory data. There are general information. Pierre-Henri already explained something on that. What is really important is we have very much static data. Most of them comes from the design. Yeah? That means the structure, the components and all these things. Then some of them comes from the production. For instance, the carbon footprint. Some of them are dynamic data, comes originally from the design, means, for instance, the capacity. And then we have the dynamic data, which are changing during the use of the battery. Yeah? For instance, the up-to-date capacity, the cycle times, and all these things, which are at least very important to know from the use phase, oh, what is with this battery? Is this a risk for being creating fire as we had in beforehand, and all these things? And that's really important, especially for the next steps of the R phases, means to say, oh, let's put this battery into the recycling. Or maybe to take this battery after they achieved 80% of capacity to storage for solar, for the solar industry and all these things. Yeah? So this is really important to keep on the best side the battery into the circle, because when we are performing recycling, then this is the last way. Yeah? So then we are at least destroy energy. So as much as possible, it's better to reuse the entire battery pack or even cells for other items. And what European Commission learned that, okay, is as well to open up the DPP for voluntary data, not only for the mandatory ones, so that companies can make business with that. Some of them are as well to the different disciplines, or let me say product groups, different if it is voluntary or at least mandatory. For instance, a repair manual, yeah, it's very important. So, or the spare parts. So anyhow, you can see in an example of the battery pass when you're just scanning this code, because this comes from the QR code, this comes from the battery pass project, which derives from the regulation and from the chemistry and all the other industry demands this kind of specifications. So, and this kind of three architecture items at least was as well defined from the battery pass project as a technical guidance. So now looking to, let me say, a helicopter view of the DPP. And as I mentioned, people are aware of all these new regulations. Looking to the DPP in total, we see how important this is for European Commission. Because at least 6 directorates general are working on that. So Pierre Henry is representing one of them, DG Environment. And I'm not so familiar with all the, let me say, structures of the European Commission, but it's like a ministry in directorate. So 6 ministries are working on that. Yeah, this is even for European Commission a challenge, I guess. Yeah. So on the other hand, we have the industry. And in the beginning, they said, oh, another regulation. It's a burden. But now, step by step, they see that the DPP is an enabler for business. It's not just a burden. Yeah? They see, for instance, all the issues of value chain control. Yeah? We see that in the battery regulation, we see from the digital perspective, the point from the sourcing, means supply chain, but even for the use. So based on that, companies see already the value of the DPP for completely renovating their IT system. Yeah? The same is for the industry coming into the connection to the customer. Today, for instance, when we are looking to LG, yeah, you are selling your products, but you don't know what's happened with that. With the DPP, you know what's happened with your products. Yeah? And this creates a lot of opportunities. And last but not least, the digital industry. Yeah? I get every week a lot of calls. Hey, Thomas, in your standards, you have to foresee my blockchain technology, whatever. So this means this is boosting at least the opportunities for the digital industry. So and everything is about the circularity. So we, in Korea and in EU, this is at least a vital objective. So standardization, because Europe started with all of this. This means CEN and CENELEC started with the standardization of the technical system. But what we see is now worldwide, it pops up. In our standardization committees, we call this mushroom pop-up. So I didn't count it anymore, the initiatives in standardization of DPP when it's reached more than 30. Yeah? And even 8 comes from China. So now, why it's so electrifying? We do have the regulations, and we do have more, a lot of regulations, even for car industry. And this is worldwide. We have from US CEF3, from California, and all these things. So this is really a challenge. You see, just for car industry, which kind of different regulations are demanding DPPs. So what we see is regulation. We have a time issue, because in February 2027, every battery which has certain classification, not all of the classifications, as Pierre-Henri explained, are affected to that, but it is, of course, EVs, electric vehicles. It is the light means of transportation, all of the nice batteries for your bicycles, and the industry batteries above 2 kilowatt hours. So they are demanded to have a battery passport, yeah, from 2027. So, and on the other hand, I mentioned already the issue of the DPP for renovating the entire digital value chain. There is a big market volume. You had already explained how much comes from the Battery Association. So of course the IT giants already are behind. So this means in our standardization committees, Microsoft went into the game. Huawei went into the game. Of course they have the dollar signs in their eyes. Yeah? And of course the niche partners. We have the digitization for the integration and for the vertical integration of that. We have these new opportunities for companies to get in touch with their customers. And we have this technology push, as I explained. So, by the way, because of some constraints, we have a really tough timeline. You see, we have the ESPR and we have the battery regulation. And the battery regulation already, as Pierre-Henri explained, started or went into force in 2023. And this means just 42 months and then have to be applied. There's no way out. Yeah? And we started with standardization just in January 2024. And we have to finish this year already, more or less. So there are some negotiations. And all of you who are, let me say, familiar with standardization, to have just 1.5, 2 years for standardizing such a complex system, it's normally like go over water. Yeah? And this is a challenge. So this means we have a big pressure from European Commission. Hey, provide the standards. You can imagine this is a challenge, but I will tell you how we manage this. So again, because this kind of picture came from yesterday, we have this separation, the data specification and the system. And what is really important, the system specification is relevant or related to all products. So we do have in Europe one system specification, nothing else. And we have the data specification for each product groups, even for the batteries. Yeah. So, but what we have by having this, we have separated this. And this is a very good point. As I mentioned, European Commission made a lot of things very good during this time. And the first one is to separate the specifications of data to the system, so that the system has the obligation to carry all the data, but we can have it in parallel with the different data specifications. And that, I think, very important. So in our JTC 2024, for the system, this is out of our scope. Yeah? So in this standardization group, in this committee, we have to implement the demands from the European Commission. And that's really important. And of course, by the way, the battery regulation, construction products and so on, we are now something like 400 experts working on all these standards. What is important from the perspective of Korea is that we are following a complete inclusive approach. Because we know in all the different product sectors, there exist already standards for most of the technical items. So what we have to do is to have an inclusive approach that a lot of, especially in industrial and in international standards, can be compliant. Because maybe LG is working with specific items already, with international standards. They would be really embarrassed if they have to change. And this is the same in Europe. So this means we have to foresee, for instance, the application of different data carriers, of different identification schemes, so that companies do not need too much to adapt. Yeah? That's really important. So in this standardization, and I just mentioned here some of the interoperability challenge, we had to integrate. Yeah? And that's a really important thing, and this is completely new. We cannot follow a Highlander principle, yeah? Just one wins. And by the way, we are looking how to align these standards to global value chains. Because we know we are dependent in Europe from the global value chains. So this is really important for Korean companies that we not just close the door. Yeah? So now where we are today, what we started is to develop at least a meta structure based on an ISO scheme where all the technical aspects of a DPP are covered in order to have a modular system so that we can develop independently as much as possible the standards, for instance, for the data carriers. Because in the data carriers, we will have a big progress with NFC and so on. On the other hand, the exchange protocols do not change so much. So this is the idea, to have it modular as much as possible, so to achieve interoperability, yeah? To have it not integrated. So now you see, we finished the drafting of the standards already. So now 6 from 8 of these modules went already in an inquiry. This means all the national standardization bodies now are able to comment. So based on these comments, we will improve, and then we will send this to Senelec, to the board members, to say, okay, do we get the approval? So this, we are stay. This means just after, let me say, more than 1 year working on that in total, we finished all these 8 modules, for instance, the APIs, this is the interfaces between the different systems, already, yeah, by having an inclusive approach. You can imagine this is a challenging issue by having so much particular interest. So now, there are some else. So now, last but not least, I have 1 minute left. We discovered, as I mentioned in the beginning, let me say beginning last year, oh, we do have a problem. Because if we have a standard written in text and so on, it's not enough to have an executable system. So we started in April this year to develop test beds for the software engineering for companies like Hyundai, because they have to be compliant with that. There's no way out. From the data perspective, yeah, are my data compliant to the regulation? And of course, to allow a secure change process. As Pierre-Henri already explained, we will change data points because we will learn from that. And we need a system in total which is changeable, because if every change costs so much, forget it. Yeah? And this is the idea of exactly this project. We just started in April this year. And this is our project scope, from the test system, from the validation of the data, and even from the emulation of the IT system on the side of the European Commission. Remember, the European Commission owns the registry. Thank you so much.
네, 지금까지 그 센셀렉에서
So Mr. Knote just touched upon the standardization effort that's currently underway. Thank you.
예, 다음 발표자를 모시겠습니다.
Now let me welcome the next speaker. Just while he prepares for his presentation about standards, I am a board member of IEC. So IEC and ISO, before this was submitted to the IEC, so I always wanted to help the Korean companies to let them prepare for the upcoming standardization, but I could not access these materials in advance. So I have so many questions to Thomas, and I hope to have chances to talk to you after this session. The next speaker is from LG Energy Solution. We have Mr. Sungwan Chun to talk about LG Energy Solutions' response to the EU battery regulation and its circular economy transition strategy. Good afternoon. My name is Chun Sung-wan from LG Energy Solution.
그래서 순환성 관련된 요구사항,
So I want to talk about
순환 경제
I want to talk about the EU battery regulation and our response to that requirement. So my presentation will cover the first company introduction and the circularity requirements in EU and challenges and suggestions. Because we don't have time, I will skip the company introduction, move straight over to the circularity requirements. EU battery regulation is unique because this is an act that deals with a specific product, a specific battery product. So I thought this was a unique and new challenge.
특히 그 내용 중에
Because if you look at the details, there's a mention of carbon footprint, recycled contents, and removability and replaceability. All of these new requirements, that is very new. So we had a lot of challenges to prepare for this upcoming regulation.
네, 처음에 아까
Mr. Anri covered most of it in the beginning, so I will skip some of the these parts. Let me just briefly summarize it. So all the LNT battery and their different timeline for the declaration, class, and threshold, and the regulation will be applied in according to that. This is a draft label, so this shows the carbon footprint, and this is a class A, B, C, D, E. A is the best and E is the lowest. It's a grade for the batteries, and if you are a E class battery, it is not eligible for sale in the EU market, for example. But this is a draft, so it's subject to change. So printing in color and attaching this to each of the batteries, is it environmental or is it sustainable? So these kind of discussions take place. And in the 24, it should be applied, but however, there's a slight delay. So after 1 year, it will be implemented. So I think each product will have a little bit of delayed schedule. So when I was responding to this regulation, these are the challenges that we felt, because carbon footprint is not just about disclosing. It has to be verified by a third party. And this verification by third party has to be in the noble list, and it has to be 1 year after that. The regulation announcement and noble list update has a different timeline, so if there is a gap. So I calculated my carbon footprint, but it's not verified, so I cannot disclose it. There could be some of the challenges due to delayed or difference of the timeline. And when this regulation was first announced in May 2024 about electricity modeling, how do we decide how to decide how to calculate the electricity modeling was in the package. However, the average electricity output factor was to be used in the beginning, and for renewable energy, whether it is only the renewable energy that is directly connected to the electricity grid will be calculated in the electricity modeling. So many companies and countries oppose this because, for example, coal-fired plants if the company is located in a country with a lot of carbon-powered electricity, they have to use coal-fired power plant electricity, because the companies do not have any discretion in choosing the energy resource. So there's a lot of opposition. And for third-party verification, if I make a same sell, I sell to different clients. If different clients have their own different third-party to verify, so with the same product, I would have to get it verified by 4 different third-party companies. So this was going to cause a lot of burden for the manufacturer. And next is recycled contents in EV battery. Cobalt, nickel, and lithium of recycled materials has to be documented. First, you have to disclose what you are using now, and there's the first minimum target and the second minimum target from 2036. You have to comply with the second target, which is going to be more strict, and at the end of 2028, we have to, the EC will review whether these targets are suitable or not. However, but in the process, our concern is because the first target takes place in 2031, but this number, if the batteries that we sell now, when it is returned, how much can we receive from these used batteries, and how much we make in 2031? But if you look at the market condition, we have a lot of things taking place that we didn't expect. For example, EV demand is declining, some say, and also because many people use EVs and battery life of the EV was much longer than we expected. People said in the beginning, 8 years is just the life cycle, expected life cycle of the battery for EVs, but it was actually much longer than that. So if we compare all that, in 2031, we could retrieve much less than we expect now. But if we do not receive as much as we expected, then we will have to pay additionally to procure used batteries. So how do we reconcile that? How that will be changed by that time, I think, is our concern. And for this to go on very well, so we have to have a verification or validation from where this used battery comes from. Well, electricity comes from both coal-fired power plants and nuclear power plants and renewable power plants. But we do not know, there's no way to discern, but electricity coming from PV has certification. So we know how much is coming from PV, but it is not possible to know that whether how much is coming from nuclear or coal-fired power plants. So it is not easy to learn about that for used batteries as well. Think about the packs. Think of a laptop or the battery packs in the cell phone. Consumers can remove it and replace it with a new one. Think about the old cell phones when we used a few years ago. I think this is possible. If we update the design, I think we will be able to replace and remove the batteries in the EV. But for LMT, it's not easy, because this is a light means of transport. It's a small cylinder batteries. We have to design in a manner that the independent person can remove and install the new one. Who are those independent people? The independent professional, who is the kind of person? What kind of credentials does that person have? We do not have much information about those credentials. So to change the design so that an independent person that we don't have no information about can replace it, that's not easy. And there's a grandfathering. To replace, we need some parts, we need new cells. After 5 years, the regulation says we have to supply after 5 years that we sell this product. For example, if a bicycle will be produced in 2027, we can do that grandfathering. Look at the second category. Transportation modes that are being manufactured in 25 now or manufactured last year and still will be sold in 2027, we have to change the design to meet this regulation. And changing the design is actually making a new product for us. So it'll also be a challenge. And maybe if you sell it in 23 and it reached 27, you still have to prepare the spare parts to be replaced in 27. So if we go into detail, this is very complex. So because LG Energy Solution has to prepare to satisfy all these regulations, it's a very complex process. And next is about the due diligence. So I will briefly go over due diligence because it was already touched upon. We have to have a full picture of the supplied raw materials, whether those raw materials have any issues. We have to have a system to verify, and the information has to be disclosed. That information has to be verified as well. For example, cobalt, nickel, and lithium manganese are the minimum raw material that has to be mandatorily disclosed to the public. That was supposed to begin in August 2025, but in the new package that is a little bit delayed, and the scope of waiver was only for these small companies. Now SMEs are subject to this waiver, and the frequency of this reporting had been a little bit relaxed, so that's easier for us than before. The biggest concern we have about this is this risk management platform. To establish that kind of platform, we have to have the name and address of the suppliers that supplied raw materials. But for us, it's a business confidentiality, that kind of information. And disclose that kind of information to the public, I think, creates more concerns for us. And this due diligence, we have very similar requirements in CSDDD and CSRD because we have to prepare for the battery regulation of the EU, but also respond to CSDDD and CSRD at the same time. I want these requirements to be aligned in the future to minimize overlapping of these efforts. And this is a table for waste battery management. So there's first EPR. The manufacturer sells, and that does not end there. The manufacturer, after selling, has to have the responsibility for it to be reused and recycled. Not up to the very end of reuse and recycle, but the manufacturer has to prevent from that used batteries from being going to normal, like a garbage disposal utilities. The manufacturer has to make sure that it is up for recycling and reusing. And for portable LMT, EV, and SLI, for industry batteries, for EVs to industry batteries, there's no collection target. Basically, reuse and recycle everything. However, we don't have the target because EVs, many people sell their used cars. It could go outside of EU market. I think that's why maybe there is no specific target for EV. These used batteries have to have this recycle efficiency. More than 65% of the total weight has to be recycled. It goes up to 70% by 2030. And out of those 65%, cobalt, lead, lithium has to be mostly recovered. And lastly, after recovering these materials, it has to be recycled. And this is a target number for that, so it has a circularity to it. Lastly, this was about the battery passport. Mr. Thomas mentioned a lot about the battery passport, so I am going to explain once again. This is encompassing all of the value chain. You collect the data from different organizations, and it is to be exchanged among stakeholders. I was listening to the previous presentations and I learned something new that I didn't understand before. If I knew them, I would have prepared this presentation differently. The question that we had was about if we collect this data and we have to disclose it to the public who scans the QR. But how do we discern the person scanning the QR code? Will each individual have an ID code? Or how do we understand who is going to scan our QR code? And second concern was about the static data and the dynamic data. So, static data means the data does not change, and dynamic data is something that we have to update. For example, the capacity of the data, what kind of event is the event history, and how long this battery was exposed to extreme heat. That kind of information is dynamic data. But in most cases, the person who knows about the history of the battery is not us. After we install this battery and sells the EV to a consumer, the battery pack itself doesn't have communication tools, so we do not have that information right away. So do we have to contact the person who owns the EV to receive this kind of data? And how do we implement it? We had a lot of questions about this data collection. And this is our LG Energy Solutions response. Even before this regulation was announced, we conducted life cycle assessment LCA to evaluate the environmental impact of our product. So we were disclosing this information. Carbon footprint was one of those information. So we provided to the customers who needed them. And also, we were a member of the Korean efforts to. Next, we move on to. This is about circular battery ecosystem. Even before battery regulation was announced, reusing and recycling is a new business sector that we can tap. So we were looking at the economic aspect of it. And because of the EU regulation, we wanted to prepare for this in a more phased manner. So in the short term, in Europe and in US, we are partnering with local companies to collect use data and do the pre-treatment. And in the mid to long term, we hope to have this perfect closed loop, have a circularity to recycle metal, return to using them to make a new product. That's our mid to long term goal. In detail, so in a local market, we will work with collection networks to secure feedstock. Our LG Energy Solutions and partner scrap will be the feedstock that could cover the major regions, and that metal will be pre-processed, and it will be going through the post-processing and PCAM and cell production in the end. For due diligence of the supply chain, we had responsible mineral procurement, and we had a supplier verification strategy. So we are going to share the requirements to the suppliers. And for tier 1 suppliers, we are going to evaluate them according to our metrics and targets, and we will perform due diligence when needed. And for tier 2 suppliers, we are going to guide the tier 1 companies to monitor tier 2. And for tier 3 suppliers, we are going to validate them through certifications. Lastly, this is about battery passport. We were working on implementing this battery passport. The data scope is so wide, and this data is scattered around. It's very fragmented all over our organization. So collecting them was the most difficult part of it. Who has this? Who owns this data? And who can secure this data? Who can procure them? It was the challenge that we are faced with because we're running out of time. I'll move fast. So in the process, in the beginning, because we didn't know where to start, were involved in the battery passport pilot for GBA. So we calculated the human rights and the carbon emission. And in the second pilot project, we were more deeply involved along with our suppliers and based on experience. Lastly, and challenges and suggestions. To work on this compliance, we saw a lot of burdens for the suppliers, and to do that, because a lot of areas require third-party verification, and those verifications are overlapping in many aspects. So we wanted to have a more harmonized process, simplified process, because the standards are not in place yet. So interpreting those regulations and instructions differ. Therefore, there was a lot of misunderstanding, trial and error. We had felt that there were a lot of loss or the waste of resources in the process. And so we hope to have a more simplified procedures and easier approach. And for battery passports, because we had our own approach, another customer has their different approach, and there's a lot of requirements that's very different. So I think it will be more efficient to have a more integrated framework that all of us can follow. And lastly, it's about confidentiality. Of course, the mandatory data that is required by this regulation has to be disclosed. However, if that information is very sensitive and it is subject to potential legal disputes, I think disclosing them despite these difficulties will be difficult for us. So I hope to have some changes in that. Thank you so much for sharing the insights and actual experience in responding to this new EU regulation. Thank you for sharing that. And because the speakers did very well on time management, but still we don't have much time, let's move on to the panel discussion. As soon as we are ready, we will begin the discussion. We have a networking dinner after this session. You can have dinner if you sign up after this event at the first floor. After signing up at the first floor, go up to the fourth floor for dinner. And speakers and panelists, we have a group photo shoot after this, so do not leave right away. Please remember to stay for the group photo. As soon as we are ready, we will begin the panel discussion. Please come up to the stage.
저는 이렇게 할까요? 테이블을 차라리 이렇게 해서 Please. 네, 그러면
Let's get started. Conscious of time, I don't think we can cover many questions. We do have some questions already prepared, so I have a couple of questions. I'm not sure if we can cover these two questions even. So I'd like to ask all these panelists to keep your answer brief. So my first question is for Mr. Ang Lee. This is quite general. So we do have like LG. Korea is a strong player in the battery field, including LG's energy solution. And like Mr. John stated, many Korean companies feel that it is a burden on them. And despite that, our Battery Industry Association and companies need to prepare well in response to these regulations. From your perspective, how well we can prepare for this regulation coming into effect?
Yes, thank you for the question. And I think actually that the presentation presented by LG is a good answer to the question, in the sense that economic operators know the main rules introduced by the regulation, so they know the field that they have to prepare, that they have to prepare the carbon footprint of their product, that they have to prepare the information that will go into the battery passport. And I think the best preparation is precisely to work with suppliers and with the different tiers of suppliers to prepare the ground, to explain to the suppliers what they will require in future, so that everyone can know what is coming and start gathering information or put in place the system that will provide this information later on. Even if the detail of the standards are not completely known, I think the main principles are known, and when the detail comes, then everyone should be ready to apply it.
오케이. 예, 감사합니다. 답변 중에 하여튼 그 표준에
So in Ang Lee's answer, he just addressed some standardization. So my question is around the standardization to Mr. Knote. As one of our board members, actually I'm also involved in the standardization effort here in Korea. Many Korean companies need to have a better understanding of standardization. And you also touched upon that we have a tough timeline and we have a very short, and you also addressed the practical challenges because of these tight timelines. But for companies, I believe that there's some gap, and our role is to bridge the gap. And at this point, and what I hear is that the standardization from the Sentinel, like it's almost complete, and it's currently it's under circulation, like you mentioned in your presentation. Anyhow, at this point, the Korean companies want to act fast. I mean, you should act fast so that we can get prepared for Korean companies and the stakeholders here in Korea. How the Korean stakeholders can participate in this process? Is there any efficient way for them to do?
Thank you so much for this question. And of course, even the German and European companies have to act fast. So for them, it's as well a nightmare. But anyhow, how to participate to that? There are at least 3 opportunities. One is related to the public inquiry, because when, for instance, Hyundai has a legal status in Germany, for instance, they can register to the national standardization body, to DIN, to the platform, and can see what's happened there and even can comment. So this is one part. The other is that every company who is listed in Europe can participate to the standardization. So they can be registered, they can request to be part of the standardization. At least the fourth one is by applying and attending to public consultations, to webinars and so on, to see how this will go into force and so on. And these are the opportunities. And Korean companies are doing this already. So, for instance, Hyundai, with the participants from Hyundai, I have a frequent interaction. So that's possible already. Of course, during the standardization work, when the experts are working on that, this is closed. This is really, there's not an opportunity to intervene. Yeah? You can imagine this is really important to be independent from every, let me say, influence from outside. Yeah? But Korean companies are collaborating already. And these are the three opportunities how Korean companies can participate.
네, 감사합니다. 그 아까 이제 우리
Thank you. And if I look at the Thomas's presentation material, you talk about the pilot project using the standards. So, if a Korean company could be involved in that project, wouldn't it be nice? So, because Sensi is a European standardizing agency, so it was not possible for Korean to be involved. However, for LG Energy Solution, so Mr. John shared a lot of difficulties in responding to this new regulation. So in that sense, do you have anything to comment, Mr. John? Oh,
The European companies are facing the same challenges on that. Yeah? There are opportunities, but as well a lot of challenges. I told already, Mr. John, half of his challenges is already solved. So this is just an issue of information. The others are still complex, so this is not so easy. So this means with my client, the automotive OEM, we are discussing how to solve this since half a year and even more. So some of them are still challenging. Some of them we have to discuss how to make it better together with the European Commission. Of course, we have a law. There's a regulation, so we cannot jump away from that. But here we need some clarification, and we need this kind of process to implement and to, as I mentioned in the beginning, this is very new. But it is demanded. As I explained already, we have to keep the material in a circle. There is no way out. So, and based on this challenge, we have to work together. This is the issue behind.
Yeah.
To tell you, we have very, very open discussions with the participants from European Commission. So in our standardization, this is completely new. We have a monthly interaction with the persons who are responsible for the DPP system. This is normally not happen in standardization, that the standardization experts have this kind of exchange. This is new. So we invent at least new procedures how to cope with the global challenges, because above us there is a global challenge. There's no way out, so we have to find new ways. And this is the issue behind. This is the reason why I came to Korea here, in order to discuss with you, to know your concerns. Yeah? And what I see is you have by 90% the same concerns. It's okay.
네, 감사합니다. 그 어쨌든 이 센세넬렉에서 한 JTC 24의 일들이 이제 ICI
So I believe that the Sensenelec outputs will be also integrated with the other ISO, the standardization, and it will be addressed at the international level. And I believe that that's the current the progress currently underway. Of course, international collaboration will happen.
Mr. John, my question goes to you. So in this situation, there are a lot of difficulties and challenges that you shared with us. So what was the biggest difficulty that you were faced with, and how did you overcome that? And because we have guests from European countries, do you have anything to ask to them or ask for them? During my presentation, I shared a lot of difficulties that we faced. When battery passport was first announced, at the same time, the blockchain was a very hot topic at the same time. So battery passport, is it blockchain? We were very confused about this new concept. And because for us, battery manufacturer, many of the blockchain platform people came to us and they gave us a lot of recommendation. They wanted to work with us to use the blockchain for this passport. Whether it be blockchain or not, I think it was the important thing was that blockchain was data carrier, passport was data carrier. The contents that we provide, the data that we provide was the most important part of it. So first thing we did was to internally learn about who owns what data is located where, and how to secure them, how to organize them. Those were the starting point. That was the first challenge. And second, I said there are a lot of data platform companies. Each client has different preference to the digital data platform. Some clients want this, some clients want that. So if we decide one platform, then it is very difficult to change that later on. So we wanted to start building something substantial within our organization, collecting data. In the end, in the future, there will be eventually some more standardization and some kind of harmonization. We are waiting for that. And one of the challenges that we had was, I mentioned it earlier, this data some kind of data is a confidential data for us. It's a business confidential data. If we have to disclose it, do we have to disclose it? Or how do we keep that kind of business secret? So our clients want everything because as long as it's required by law. However, but if it's a business confidentiality and if there's a concern about competitors, the regulation says that you have to be careful about that. So from a third-party perspective, this may not be an issue, but for us, this is a very important topic. So if there was a clearer guideline about the business confidentiality, should we just provide this data? Should we just disclose our suppliers? So that's one thing that we find it most difficult. So blockchains, and before we move on to those new technologies, should we build something more centralized platform in Korea? Should we go for a more distributed system? Maybe in the JTC 25, we have a discussion about the standardization of the data space. In Korea, I talked many times about the importance of data space to the government. And for the data sovereignty, some people prefer to have its own data space, and that's what Japan said at the Uranos. But so if the government can do something like that, but that's not being done for the Korean companies yet. So if I start on that topic, I could talk for hours, so I will stop here. So my question goes to Mr. Kim. Because the government has some plans for used batteries, integrated management system for this used batteries, and we need to tap a new market. It's a new business opportunity. And what are the things that we have to do first to nurture this new business sector? For any sector to grow, I think there are 4 important factors. First, we need legislation. Next, technology. Third, safety. Fourth is market. These are the requirements for launching a market and growing the market. The first step is legislation. So in 2023, Battery Alliance was launched in Korea, so we submitted this recommendation to the government. And recently, because if the government leads, then it will take longer to proceed. So last month, it eventually passed the National Assembly. So within this year, it will be finally passed at the National Assembly level. Next year, maybe directives and the instructions will be announced. So I hope we have a legislation framework for Korean companies to respond to battery regulation. And number 2, technology. We need a lot of R&D support for this used battery, reuse and recycle. I hope the government extends its support to this these R&D efforts. Third is safety. Safety of the battery is the priority. We need a public understanding. They have to feel safe because many people don't buy EVs because they're concerned about the safety of the batteries. Those people will never use used batteries. So companies like LG Energy Solution, with your R&D efforts, hope for you to manufacture safe batteries out of used batteries. And fourth is market. When there is a new market for used batteries, initially it will not be adopted by the private sector. The government has to lead that demand. The government has to procure that to build the market initially and then expand it for more individual consumers. I think that's the way to go. Thank you.
So, in terms of battery passport, PPP, I think environment is another important aspect, especially on carbon footprint. How can we calculate these carbon and then we can have that on DPP? So, my question goes to Mr. Puffen. So, the product carbon footprint, especially on reporting, we all know how significant it is. But in reality, how can we implement that? And what kind of challenges do we have we have? And then if you look at the presentation, some mentioned that it can actually create an opportunity and for our businesses. So what kind of challenges or what kind of benefits or opportunities do you have? Can you please share your thoughts?
Thank you very much, Dr. JJ. I think we may have to realize that the ask to those in the battery ecosystem is in fact very significant. We are asking those companies to take a lead when it comes to defining the metrics across the value chain. And just now in the presentation, we have also learned that a very significant part of the value chain actually is from the upstream. So roughly 60% plus actually comes from the upstream information. At the same time, they also have to consider what is the right infrastructure, right? Are we going to go to the cloud? What do we do on premise? What kind of platforms do we use perhaps, which are in the area of the data space and more general systems? And ultimately also the challenges in who are exactly the ecosystem players. I think it is fair to say that prior to regulations like the passport for batteries coming into effect, many of this information may not yet be so readily available within the battery manufacturing customers. So suddenly they have to take this consideration, which is why we feel that starting with the product carbon footprint is a reasonable start to make the assessment within your value chain and to document that data. Right. Primarily, it makes available the carbon emissions that are there within your own process and also in the upstream and downstream processes. But also, it is a good step to get greater proximity towards your suppliers and to be able to establish that relationship of data sharing. I think what we may want to avoid also is that the usage of generic data becomes intense in this process. Ultimately, what we are trying to recommend, at least from a technology point of view, is to make sure that what you establish in terms of data chain is as scalable as possible. Because at this point, the first priority is, how do I bring to the market a battery passport? One important pillar is, of course, the PCF. There are means which are directly within your control, your primary data. There are secondary data which are a lot tougher to extract. And of course, there is an opportunity to go for secondary databases for this. But once the product carbon footprint and the battery passport becomes more of a commodity, it in fact gets a bit of a competitive element to it. In which way you want to make sure you can deviate, compare, or even perform beyond your competition. Which is why also from Schneider's side, we are recommending and to explore how can I make sure that the data chain that I establish is as scalable and standardized as possible. Ideally having close to real-time insights into your value chain, which allows you to do re-evaluation of your PCF more quicker and more efficiently. I believe this is my comment. Thank you.
Thank you. 벌써 시간이 벌써 지나.
We actually are behind the schedule. Despite that, why don't we get some questions from the floor? If you have any questions, please raise your hand, and we will turn over the mic to you.
Life cycle assessment, and I calculate the carbon footprint for the companies, especially for the batteries. And my question is regarding the standardization of the carbon footprint. Like I examined all the guidelines of the carbon footprint, and my question is regarding the CFF, the circular footprint formula. I think it's highly dependent. It's really mainly on the European situation. It does not reflect the Korean situation. So it's really hard to calculate the CFF effects for the battery. And so what kind of efforts are going to happen in Europe, and how do you want to cooperate with the Korean companies and the government in order to make fully, calculate the carbon footprint for all the battery materials?
Because this is even difficult for the European companies. So, but I would, and I'm not an expert in all these ACA and all these things because I'm an IT guy. Yeah, but I have to answer all the time all these questions. So, what we do have is now a draft for the methodology as an outcome from the JRC. That's already happened since 23rd of June. So there is something, and of course, if you have still concerns and this is difficult, then I think it's really important to contact them, yeah, because this is really important from the data perspective, that's the first, because this is really for the batteries. The other is we do have different standardization mandates in Europe. One is for the system where I am responsible just for the techie IT issues. The other is for the data. And there's a mandate 579, which went as well to CEN, and they are elaborating exactly this methodology for the different types, means LMT for EVs and for the industrial batteries. So this is at least my answer. So there exist already committees doing that. There is this JRC, this is the Joint Research Center, and they are, I think, are open to answer to specific questions. And I know this ACA calculation issue is really a nightmare, because even there is one methodology, and we are, by testing different tools for that, we discovered a deviation between different tools, but running under the same methodology by 500%. So this is reality. So this means there is a lot of need for research, seems to be. So it is difficult.
네, 질문 답이 되셨는지 모르겠습니다. 네.
The question.
한다.
One final question. Let's get one more final question from the floor.
패널 토론.
Thank you so much for the productive discussions. My question goes to Mr. John from LG Energy Solution. You talked about battery passport response, a lot of challenges and difficulties, and you talked about the need for standardized platform. I fully relate to that and hope everything works out very well. And my question is, when you talked about battery passport, you said you shared a mock-up version of the passport. You shared the pictures about that. And there were 107 data, and also cell makers information, EV manufacturers information. So some of the confidential information will be included in the passport. And how how did you procure all that more than 107 data points from the supply chain, and how far along in the process of making a mock-up? So have you tested them? Because in EU, there's a data space platform. Did you try that, or any domestic data space companies are you working with or planning to use? So my question is about that. The passport mock-up was a means to understand what data we have to secure. So it was a pilot project. When we didn't have certain data, so we didn't have an automatic system that feeds the data. We had to look up for the data in the organization. So we were not able to see how to feed that all different data points from different suppliers. For example, we have BOM data. That exists internally, so we use that. But when we actually make a passport for our battery products, at this point, we just confirm where those data exist. This is how far along for data space, about data space. So we just wanted to prepare internally. So we didn't work with. Of course, we had meetings with external data space platform suppliers. We don't have any concrete cooperation yet. So KITECH is requested by many customers, and Circular, a blockchain provider. We had meetings. We find the potential opportunities, but we did not make any concrete decisions yet. Thank you. Because we are running out of time, I'm sure you have more questions, but we have to wrap up at this point. I want to extend my gratitude to the speakers and the panelists. Please give them a big round of applause. Thank you.